It's the 21st of the 7th, 2025. Third time of asking. The time is 10 minutes past 9. That means only one thing, that there are very many F1-centric threads at which we need to pull. 3 topics on the docket today. Oscar Piastri versus Lando Norris going into race week. Spa-Francorchamps. Oh, the humanity. A rain-strewn Spa-Francorchamps. It's going to get techier than techie things because Oscar has spoken about the championship circumstance. So too, we'll talk about Ferrari SF25 upgrade, rigidity of suspension, gearbox settings. Is this now proper SF25? Are they going to stop bringing shame on the Enzo Ferrari name or not? And so too, we'll talk about Maximilian Verstappen. Of course, we have to. Questions around his future, questions around Performance Club. And this time, for the avoidance of doubt, all F1 journalists created equal, but some are created more equal than others. Andrew Benson, the BBC, who so prides himself on integrity, veracity and truth, chimes in on the Checkered Flag podcast. And we're going to listen to all of those clips saying things that I don't think many people knew about the performance clause. If past is prologue, F1 history doesn't repeat, but sometimes it does rhyme. In the first instance, let's talk to Oscar Piastri, because he's talked about his attitude towards the championship. And whilst for Lando Norris, this might be brand new, competing with one other person in the same team for the championship, Oscar Piastri said, "This is not new for me. This is standard. What are you talking about? I am iron-born," Oscar Piastri says in inverted commas. "I am born to do this. I swim in these waters. I kill championship contenders and eat them for breakfast." People have said for a gazillion years now that Oscar Piastri is built a little bit different, stoic each and every single time. But I would put forth this as a rebuttal. He's been brilliant all season long. Only a couple of mistakes of the unforced variety. Australia won, a couple over the past couple Grand Prix, turned 6 at Austria, had himself a massive opportunity, didn't take it. And again, so brilliant has that dude been an overtake thus far, career to date. Mention no names, Baku 2024, mention no names round the outside of Sir Lewis earlier on this season. He is a killer. Italian Grand Prix 2024 springs to mind. Chicane number 2. Oscar Piastri is nothing if not forensic in the overtake, and to see him hesitate, that's uncharacteristic. That's a juxtaposition of a characterization, oxymoronic even as far as the New Zealand, the Kiwi is concerned. However, as we go into Spa-Francorchamps, you will recall that Zach Brown once upon a time said that through the high speed stuff, Spa, Eau Rouge, Blanchimont as an example, Pouan, that there is one driver at McLaren who has the upper hand, who has the cojones, who is braver on the throttle through the twisties that so epitomise F1 in 2025. When the F1 cars are in their natural habitat, that dude has a name, and his name is OJ Piastri. You will see, therefore, that the odds makers have him as the favourite to dunk on Lando Norris 1.0. Lando's brilliant when he's had his Weetabix. Of course, he was brilliant in Monaco qualifying, slaying the demons of Christmas past, executing and delivering on his not insubstantial potential for once. But when you get around these tracks, it's a different circumstance. This is OJ Piastri territory, and that's why the odds makers have him as the favourite. Oscar Piastri leaning into that, saying, "I am championship bred, iron-born." Of the two of us at that McLaren team, unsaid, there is one who has waded in these waters a very many time, and to that point, there is another chap called Maximilian Verstappen. He's not very bad at Spa-Francorchamps. A stat jumped off the page, and I'm going to read it out to you. It is important. The last time a driver went faster than Max Verstappen in Q3 in any format at Spa-Francorchamps, because by the way, it is a sprint race weekend, was 5 years ago. 2021 P1, 22 P1, 23 SQ sprint qualifying P1, 2023 qualifying proper P1, 2024 P1. It is very difficult, therefore, if past his prologue, to beat Maximilian Verstappen over the past 5 years, as makes no difference in a qualifying session. Oh, and by the way, let's talk about Scuderia Ferrari, because the Italian press and media are losing their minds. There is still uncertainty about Frederic Vasseur, that nobody's talking about it. Don't let that kid you. The absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. John Elkann still wants somebody to supersede Frederic Vasseur at the altar, of course, of not insubstantial underperformance. He's been poor. No, the team's been poor. The car's been poor. How are you going to change 99% of the components and then still not win a race? Not a proper one. Yeah, the sprint race was good. But do you know what I mean? What are we talking about here? This is Scuderia Ferrari, the red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing Corsa top. You're telling me they'll celebrate sprint race wins? What are we doing here? Small mercies, hey, for small-minded teams. They went away between this race and the last, and they've done some things. There is upgrades, of course. Lewis Hamilton has been crying, screaming for upgrades, protesting that the way they work is not sufficient, not appropriate for a championship-winning team, saying a couple of race weekends ago that the way they work and set up the car at the Canadian Grand Prix, a track around which I have had a load of success, makes no sense. That's a quote from seven-time champion Sir Lewis Hamilton's mouth. Can you imagine, as a champion, watching the way that your team work, the team to which you've just moved, and saying that the way they work does not make sense? And that team is Scuderia Ferrari, the red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing. Oh, the humanity. What are we doing in July of 2025? But they've gone away. They've listened to Sir Lewis. They conducted a test at Mugello, testing for a rear suspension. For the avoidance of doubt, lest we forget, their problems have been multitudinous, right? Particularly from Lewis Hamilton's perspective. He hasn't got the confidence in the rear in order to take high minimum speeds, mention no names, Kimi Antonelli, FP1, the Italian Grand Prix, through high speed twisters. He just doesn't have it. And again, if you're going to get the best out of a Sir Lewis Hamilton, you have to give him the tools, blend or build a car in his image. Some might say confidence setting. So they've gone away and they've listened finally. They've built a suspension that's rigid enough to give Lewis the confidence that he needs, and so too modern day Jean Alesi, the one that they call Charles Leclerc. Confidence settings. You've heard Adrian Newey in How to Build a Car saying that you need to make the car, as far as its optimization window, as broad as possible to give the drivers what? Confidence. That's where you get the extra tenth or two. So they've done it. They've nailed the suspension at the back. They've made it more rigid even to facilitate the SF25 running lower to the ground. How do you get more downforce out of a ground effect car? Run it lower to the bloody ground. Lotus told you that at the inception. Colin Chapman knew that. So why don't Ferrari? Chat, this makes no sense. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about Maximilian Verstappen, then we're going to have to talk about him properly, because Andrew Benson of the BBC on the Checkered Flag podcast. In fact, before we get into that, let me tell you something. I don't want to do the pat on the back thing. That's a waste of time. But you heard us talk about Zach Brown yesterday for the discerning eyed amongst you. He said words to this effect: I'm not surprised that Christian Horner's gone. I'm only surprised at the timing. We spoke about that. He was on a podcast or two saying words to those effects. Now the BBC's Andrew Benson, today, 24 hours after the fact, wants to report on it. Can you spell last of the late breakers? A day late and $1 short. But I digress. Jorge, you're a legend. Dios mío, esta teque. Esta muy teque, Jorge. You will not believe. Let's talk about Maximilian Verstappen. So the context looks like this. There is still rumour and speculation. Nelson Valkenburg went on a podcast, Nailing the Apex podcast, and said words to these effects. Potentially, he might have to prepare for a press event around Maximilian Verstappen's future at the Spa-Francorchamps Grand Prix weekend. His words, not mine. Conjecture and speculation, of course. Nothing is nailed, but sometimes in F1 there is no smoke without fire. In the second instance, tally that with this. Matt Bishop, friend of the channel, one of the goatiest F1 journalists who have ever goated, man who edited F1 Racing Magazine, chief communication officer of Aston Martin back in the day, and McLaren's, Ron Dennis's McLaren before then. He said words to this effect in Motorsport magazine, that he would anticipate that Maximilian Verstappen would want to seal his future, understand, bathe in the very murky waters of certainty for once, have his future nailed in 2026 and 27 by the time he goes home to the Zandvoort Grand Prix. That's the first race after the summer break. We get July the 31st and then we'll have 4 weeks. He will want to be celebrating. It is papal smoke setting, says Matt Bishop. Tally that, therefore, with this. We know Toto, the boy who cried wolf, has been having quite open conversations that the two of them, Max and Toto, parked their bloody yachts next to each other, soiree, and unleashed the lion. They were having conversations. Now, I can't say for sure, in the same way that I can't say for sure that the sun's going to come up tomorrow. 99.9% of the time, they would have had conversations. They have been having conversations. Toto makes no secret of that. We've said on this channel a gazillion times, and I will reiterate for the avoidance of doubt. Do not think for a second that Toto, the boy who cried wolf, wouldn't hesitate to drop kick in the chest one King George Russell of Kingsley Norfolk. Absolutely. If you're brazen enough, Toto, to come out before the world's press media over the course of a Grand Prix weekend and say words to this effect, that I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't explore the opportunity, that we're not flirting, we are talking, then that tells you all you need to know. You can take that one to the bank. Scott, you're a legend. I appreciate you, Scott. Far too kind as always. So the context is this, leading into Exhibit A, B, and C, and D that I'm about to show you. Andrew Benson, man who holds truth front and center of everything that he does. Christian Horner is gone. So what does that mean? Does that mean that Max is more or less likely to stay? You tell me. Your guess is as good as mine. But here is the broader context, the most pertinent context. Julianne Sedasoli said a couple of different things. She said on the performance clause, we know for a fact there were performance clauses in Maximilian Verstappen's contract. Whether the performance clauses relate to the drivers, second or third, as at the summer break, that's the principal point of contention. Nobody knows. Whether there's talk of a Constructors' Championship and whether Red Bull need to be in third in order to mitigate for Maximilian Verstappen nulling and voiding his contract with immediate effect, that again is a point of contention. Nobody debates the third in the Constructors, but whether in the drivers it's second or third. I've heard nobody speak to that. James Allen said one thing, Bishop said another one. Everybody has a different thing. There is no consensus on the details of the performance clause. Why is this important? Well, because otherwise Mercedes, if they want to get the signature of a Max Verstappen, they will need to exercise a break clause which will cost them anywhere to the tune of $100 million US, and then in all likelihood another 100 million on top for Maximilian Verstappen's per diem even remuneration. 200 million US dollars therefore in Max Verstappen's first year at Mercedes is how much he will cost Mercedes. I don't think, I know they're keen. You've heard Ola Kalunius saying that Max Verstappen would look brilliant in black. Why wouldn't you go for him? He's the best driver on the grid and we're the best team. Yada, yada, yada. I would contend that if they can mitigate and or minimise for that cost, leveraging a performance clause or two, they would. And now, on the Checkered Flag podcast, the BBC's one with Andrew Benson and this time Jaime Alguersuari. To my mind, this chap Jaime used to drive for Red Bull, did he not? And he's had some things to say. Let's listen to it, chap. Roll the clip.
Having said that, it's a change of an era now. Who knows what's going to come for Red Bull? I'm not sure. What I can say is that there was a lot going on inside in the last few years with so many different decisions from Dr. Helmut Marko, Christian, different Red Bull drivers going back and forth. Some strange decisions as well from them, even thinking that maybe they are confused on their decisions and they don't know what's going on, with the driver selection and so on. And now, Adrian Newey left for a reason. There must be a reason for his exit. And now it looks like the whole team is falling apart. That's how I see it from the outside, really. And I'm completely sure Max will leave as well.
Jaime Alguersuari punctuates his stanza thus, and I am convinced Max Verstappen will leave as well. It's been Rob Marshall, it's been Newey, it's been Wheatley, now Horner, and then Max Verstappen next. Oh, the humanity chat. Red Bull will cease to exist as the racing team that we know it to be if Maximilian Verstappen, the only man of the 20 on the grid that can drive a fire-breathing dragon, understeer it to snap, oversteer, depending on which facet of the turn you are approaching and broaching. When he leaves, who are you going to get to drive that team? Yuki Tsunoda, he was meant to be the next one, right? The next backup dancer, a Danny Rick back in the day, per se. And he hasn't scored points for, if I recall correctly, 5 races back to back. What are we doing there for? You don't need to hypothesize. This doesn't need an imagination nor any sort of bright-minded thinking. You don't need to be able to solve for Fermat's loss theorem to understand what will happen to Red Bull if Max Verstappen takes his foot off the pedal and goes to one Mercedes, the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth. He's Alguersuari. When asked by Harry Benjamin, the legend of F1, why do you think that, Jaime? Why do you think Maximilian Verstappen will leave? Roll the clip.
Clear as to how we've ended up in this situation. Jaime, I want to go back to how you ended your opening statement. You seem convinced Max Verstappen will most likely leave the team then at Red Bull. Why and where do you think he will go?
Well, Andrew actually did a very nice clarification of the whole situation right now at Red Bull. And the thing is that it's very simple to understand why Max would think of leaving right now, because Formula One is a team sport, and you wanna make sure you're in the winning car. At the moment, 2026 regulation, it's obviously a question mark for everyone. Nobody really knows what's gonna happen, but you kind of get an idea. You want to make sure you're in a very competitive car, besides the money, because one thing I know is that Max is not really definitely looking at the money. He's a hunter, he looks for the win. And probably is one of those drivers in Formula One, one of those very few drivers in Formula One that only thinks of winning. Because
no kidding, Sherlock. Max Verstappen has told you that out of his own mouth. He only is there to win. He's a fire-breathing dragon of an F1 driver, not interested with the frivolities, the trappings of fame. He only wants to win races. That's why when you go back and watch the documentaries, the BBC one with Natalie Pinkham way back in the day, or Lee Mackenzie even, you will see that as soon as Max Verstappen jumps out of the cockpit, the race proper, the next thing that he wants to do is be in the sim. That's why, because Max Verstappen is nothing if not a fire-breathing dragon of an F1 peddler. He wants to win races and championships only. 4-year deal, says Johan, 500 million potentially. If you're talking about the breakout clause and he can't null and void his contract. Michael Cowell said that for them, it's better to develop a great car with the same drivers. I don't think he said it's better, Safak. I think he said that he's focused on that into next year. That doesn't mean to say, though, if they can get their hands on a Maximilian Verstappen, Lawrence Stroll particularly, that they won't do that. If it's third, Max will just DNF for the next 2 races. So go on then, Gunnar. You mentioned a really, really good point. For the avoidance of doubt, the gap between Max in third and George Russell in fourth is 18 points. Max currently in the driver's standings sits on 165 points, 18 points down the road from King George Russell of Kingsley in Norfolk. Therefore, that means that this is within their control, right? It's in their gift. If after the next 2 races, Spa and Hungary, if I recall correctly, George Russell has gapped Max Verstappen to the tune of 19 points, then he's done one of these to himself. Hattori, no, that's techie. That's suicide. Is it not for George Russell? Of course he wants to win and do his best, but does he want to undermine his position at Mercedes by enabling them to grab Max Verstappen for 100 million in remuneration as opposed to 100 plus 100 for remuneration and break clause? It's techie. If I see any Maximilian Verstappen DNS, particularly around Spa-Francorchamps, I will be calling it. Let's talk to that performance clause, because Benson said something that I wasn't aware of on the Checkered Flag podcast, and I think it's worthy of mention. Recall at the outset, I said some people said, Julian Cerasoli said it's top 2. Ergo, if Max Verstappen is third or lower, then he can null and void his contract over the course of the summer break. I've heard other people in the know say it's not second, it's third. Andrew Benson always speaks about the light of F1 truth, always prides himself on it. And the real reason why I say that is to say this. all F1 journeys are created equally, but some are created more equal than others. When Andrew Benson says this, you can take it to the bank. Roll the clip.
I would say there's a bunch of things to talk about here. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. The first thing is about Max Verstappen's future. It's clear he's considering it, but I don't know what he's going to do. What we do know is he's under contract till the end of 2028. We know there are performance clauses in that contract because Helmut Marko told the BBC that there were earlier this year, and Horner has since admitted it as well. We don't know what those performance clauses say. Typically, a Red Bull driver performance contract clause it revolves around third place in the championship. That's where Verstappen is right now, and he doesn't look like he's under any prospect of losing it. So what sort of influence does that have?
If past his prologue, therefore, Andrew Benson, and F1 history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, he reckons that Red Bull like to put their performance clauses in around third. Now, back in the day, that would have made sense when they were all down the road. RB19 settings, one of the most dominant cars that you'll ever see in F1 history. It made sense then because Max was never going to be in third. But that's when he signed the contract, you'll recall. 2021, he extended. They would have never thought in their right mind for the foreseeable future, both medium and short term, that Max Verstappen will be fighting for third, second maybe, but third. Ergo, Andrew Benson drops a bombshell there. He says he doesn't know. This is conjecture and speculation. But again, if F1 past is F1 prologue, then potentially Maximilian Verstappen's contract, it revolves around being third. If he is lower than fourth, Houston, we have a problem as far as Red Bull are concerned, because that will mean that over the summer break, Max can start having conversations proper, looking to sign a contract with the boys and girls from Brackley and Bricks. So sans responsibility of having a contract in place with Red Bull Racing. It's going to get techier than techie things over the next couple of weeks, because this discussion is not going away. I can't wait to see Max Verstappen at Le Mans. It might well happen. I would argue that it becomes more real, more substantive of a probability by the day. Alguersuari is now a musician, but obviously still keen interest in F1 and connected to Red Bull teams. I concur. North American comeback Perez, story worthy of a movie sequel. Vamos. Is it though really, Benzi? Not if he comes back and fails. I understand there was an F1 movie that talked about Brad Pitt's redemption arc, but I mean, fairy tales are only for the movies. Russell is okay, but Sky Sports said he's on the same level of... Did they really say that, Andrew? How very dare they? You can't really say that with a straight face, I would argue. King George Russell on the same level as Maximilian Verstappen. You behave yourself. Have you seen 2025? Mention no names if we're going to open the Max Verstappen glazing door. Mention no names. Saudi Arabia, Suzuka, British Grand Prix, all of which Max Verstappen had no right to drop it on pole, notwithstanding the durable competitive advantage that papaya-coloured car, the MCL39, has in the hands of Lando Norris. Ladies and gentlemen, as far as I'm concerned, sporting endeavour par excellence in the sphere of Formula One. It's Max Verstappen's era, and we are just living in it, willing participants. And for that, I've got to put forth this supposition. I am grateful. The question on everybody's lips, the exam question for which we need answers, and we'll get them over the next 2 or 3 weeks, is where will Mr. Verstappen be plying his trade in 2026 and 2027? Well, if he's lower than third in the championship, as at the summer break, go fourth or lower, then you can bet your bottom dollar that smooths his path to the boys and girls from Brackley and Brits of Toto, the boy who cried wolf, will be licking his lips. Oh, the humanity.